One of the biggest challenges for weavers is that, barring a few classes and books, we must learn to weave on our own. Unlike most other fiber artists, floor loom weavers generally practice in solitude. Most of our work is done by ourselves at home. As a result, we don't get a chance to see how other weavers wind, beam, thread, and weave their warps or wet finish the resulting cloth. So we have to develop our own ways of doing all these processes based on what we've read and heard. We never get a chance to watch and learn the methods that make more experienced weavers develop over years of weaving, tweaks that make weaving more efficient and more enjoyable. We understand how to make cloth, but not the multitude of small motions that make the process quicker, easier, and more fun. One of my luckiest breaks as a novice weaver was an opportunity to study in person with Laura Fry, one-on-one, for 5 days. That is from the foreword that's been written by Tian Chu for Laura Fry's book, The Intentional Weaver. When I got this book years ago, I was at home raising tiny babies, and I read that part where Tian got to go to Laura Fry's studio in Prince George and learn to weave with her for 5 days straight. I was like, I want to do that. How can I do that? How could I get that chance? And then fast forward to now, and this past October, we invited Laura Fry to come to the SweetGeorgia studio to film a class with her, specifically about all the techniques that she teaches in the Intentional Weaver book that she's written here. And somewhere in those 4 or 5 days that Laura spent with us at the SweetGeorgia studio, I realized that that was exactly what I had hoped for and wished for and wanted all those years before, to be able to sit and learn at the feet of a master weaver and get coached by Laura Fry on how to weave. So back in October 2021, Laura Fry, master weaver, master Canadian weaver, came down from Prince George to Vancouver to film with us for about 4 or 5 days all of the things that she teaches in this book, as well as in her master's monograph, wet finishing, Magic in the Water. And so we learned how to do wet finishing cloth with her. We learned how to do everything from how to wind a warp, how to rough slay a reed, how to thread heddles, how to lash onto your warp, how to dress your loom with a trapeze. If you've never seen a warping trapeze before, it's amazing. And learned all of these very special techniques and tricks from Laura in order to learn the nuances of how to get better at weaving, how to weave more efficiently, how to weave more ergonomically. All of these things are what we learned with Laura back in October. And so since that time, we've been editing hours and hours and hours of footage. Leah has been editing hours and hours and hours of footage. Thank you so much, Leah. And finally put together this course that we're so excited to share with you. It just launched on January the 12th. I really encourage you guys to go check out this class. It's going to be on the School of Sweet Georgia. So go to schoolofsweetgeorgia.com/weaving and you'll find Laura's new class there. And it is so fantastic, all of the things that she has taught. While we were planning for this class, we thought that rather than just teaching the techniques out of the book and having everyone see Laura and see her do it, because she does everything really quick and super efficiently, and it just looks very graceful, very elegant, but she's very quick with all of her motions. And that could be theoretically kind of intimidating for someone who's looking at that and immediately saying, oh, I don't think I could ever do that. And so part of this course is having me as a weaver come and be coached by Laura and her showing me how to do those same techniques. And you can watch me fumble through all of these new motions and movements because I'm not quick with these techniques because they're new to me. So one of the things that we had talked about at the start while we were planning this video was, should I be showing you how awkward it is to learn these techniques, that like my hands feel really clumsy, that it feels uncomfortable sometimes to do some of these things, not uncomfortable, just awkward and clumsy to do some of these motions, that you're going to see me fumble around with a lot of these things, that I get tangled up in threading heddles and all sorts of things, that I like flip my direction, or I lose count of counting a warp thread, all of these kinds of things. Yeah, is it okay? And I think that at the end of the day, it is great. I think it is a great idea to let people know that even though I have been weaving since 2006, and I know how to dress my loom, I know how to make my cloth, I know how to do certain things the way that I do them, that it is perfectly good to learn how other people do them and to learn their techniques and to open up and broaden your experience and be open to the idea that there are different ways or better ways of doing the same things. I'm very excited to learn Laura's techniques, and since October I have really tried to absorb as much as I can, just incorporate as much of her skill and technique into my own practice. So I have pretty much switched to fully lashing on all of my warps. I have switched to the threading hook that she talks about in the class, which is this one. This is the Harrisville brass threading hook. I really like these. This has really been awesome. So I've basically switched to using this threading hook almost exclusively now. Well, yeah, exclusively. I use this for all the threading of the heddles, and you flip it around and you can slay the reed with it. And so this one we have on our website now because we love it so much. I have one in each room where there's a loom. So yeah, I've switched to her techniques for winding a warp, for rough slaying the reed, for threading the heddles, for beaming the warp with a trapeze now. I do all of those things. I've been doing it on all of my looms. All of the warps that I've set up since October have been with these same techniques. And I feel like, yes, it has made me more efficient and more efficient. Everything goes a little bit faster. I do time myself on all of these things. They're not necessarily timings that I am competing against anybody else for speed in any of these processes. They're basically times that I record for myself so that I can compare from one warp to the next warp. Did I get better? Did I get faster? Did I get more efficient with what I'm doing? Also, it matters what kind of material you're using. So if you're using a thicker cotton yarn versus if you're using a thin silk yarn, like maybe the handling of that is going to be different and the timing of that's going to be different. But in any case, I've been keeping track of the times that I spend threading heddles, slaying the reed, all of those kinds of processes as a record for myself. So I will tell you that I was mortified on more than one occasion during that week when we were filming with Laura. There was there was a few. So firstly being that I have a Mira counterbalance loom. It's a Mira 2 from Leclerc. It's the 45-inch wide floor loom. It's a counterbalance loom. I've talked about it several times on this channel, and I love this loom. Counterbalance means that the way that it's tied up, when you step on a treadle, it pulls the shafts down. It pulls those shafts that it's tied to, it pulls it down. And so it's called a sinking shed loom. Now, majority of the looms that are talked about, are used in North America, are rising shed looms. So like a jack loom, like a shacked baby wolf loom is a rising shed loom. And convention in North America, when you look at a weaving magazine, convention is that weaving drafts are written for rising shed looms. So when you step on a treadle, those shafts go up. So in terms of like wrapping my head around rising shed versus sinking shed, a lot of the times when I use my Mira loom, which is a sinking shed loom, I tie it up in a manner to pretend that it's a rising shed loom. So I just tie up the opposite shafts. So if I step on 1 and 2, in order to make 1 and 2 go up, I actually tie up 3 and 4. It sounds really confusing, and I think that for a moment there, it totally did confuse both me and Laura, because she also has a Mira loom at home, and so she knows that that's a sinking shed loom, and she knows that I have a Mira loom, and that's a sinking shed loom, and so she wrote a draft for us to put onto the Mira loom in order to film with, and that was supposed to be set up to be for sinking shed. And I had read her draft as a rising shed draft and tied it up in a completely different way. And so when she's treadling this pattern on the Mira loom, and it's on camera, it's on film, and she's treadling it the way that she would normally treadle it, and she's like, this is not looking like it's supposed to look. And I think that was all compounded also by the fact that I also tied up the treadles to walk. So rather than having all of the treadles tied up sort of 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 1, I tied them up so 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 1. I tied it up that way because I was using a pattern where I was walking the treadle. So that allowed me to alternate my feet as I was weaving if I was going 1, 2, 3, 4. And so there was a moment of confusion on set because I had tied up my loom in a different way than how it would conventionally be tied up as. And I was doing all this mental gymnastics of translating the fact that I was walking the treadles and all of these kinds of things. So that was one point where I was completely mortified with my weaving setup. The second time I was completely mortified weaving in front of Laura Fry was when we were setting up the baby wolf loom on camera. So basically what happened is we wound a warp for the baby wolf, and then we did the rough slaying, and we're gonna beam the warp using a trapeze. So we set up the whole trapeze, and then we beam the warp goes on the loom. And then we threaded all the heddles, and we demonstrated threading all the heddles, slaying the reed, lashing on, all of these kinds of things. And I think that I had finished the last bit and getting it tied up, tying up all the treadles, getting everything set up so that I could start weaving on it. And so I finished dressing the loom, and I started to weave the header, weave a bit of the pattern, and the pattern is supposed to be Wall of Troy. I had only just looked at the weaving draft, the threading draft, and tie up, and the treadling progression, and I hadn't looked too closely at the treadling progression. The treadling progression to me looked like a zigzag, so I was like, oh, okay, it's a zigzag. So I started to just weave the zigzag, and I wove it as a point twill progression. So I was basically weaving 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. Laura was walking by, and I was like, Laura, I finished setting up the loom. And she looked over at what I had woven and the pattern that I'd woven. She was like, oh, great. And then she went to go have lunch. It was much later when I realized, when I was like hand drawing out the weaving draft again for my own records, for my own notes, I was hand drawing out the draft. And then I realized my mistake, that it wasn't a point twill treadling progression. 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. Which meant that when you repeat that, there's a longer section where you're going in the same direction. So it's 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so I did manage to weave the proper Wall of Troy pattern, and you will see that in all the beautiful photos that we took afterwards. But just know that changing up your treadling progression makes a huge difference. So those were just 2 of the times where I was completely mortified. Sprinkling in all of the other times where I felt completely out of place and very awkward, threading the heddles and getting all tangled up and all of those things. But that is all part of the learning process. It does feel weird, and it does feel awkward, and it does feel embarrassing and uncomfortable to make mistakes and to do things that you're not used to doing. But it's all part of the learning process. And I feel like months later out of this, I've learned so much, and I'm so excited for you to learn from this course as well. So if you want to come join us in Laura's class, please do find us on School of Sweet Georgia. You can see us at schoolofsweetgeorgia.com/weaving, and you'll find all of the weaving classes there, and Laura's class is there, The Intentional Weaver is there. You'll also find the book, The Intentional Weaver, is on the Sweet Georgia website now as well. We have many copies of this. We have the brass threading hook as well, and all of these things are available right now. And also my weaving study group is on right now. So the Twill Gamp weaving study group is happening right now in the School of Sweet Georgia. You can join us there for that. It's never too late to join. The first week was all about planning and talking about set and choosing a yarn. So if you haven't started yet, totally fine. You can still join us. There's no deadline, there's no rush, there's no whatever. Just join us whenever you can if you're wanting to learn how to weave a twill gamp. So I'm excited to share with you guys the Intentional Weaver class, and just know that A couple of weeks from now, there's also going to be a second class with Laura Fry on learning how to wet finish your hand-woven cloth. And so we'll be talking more about that in coming weeks. So that is it for this week. I would love to hear from you about your embarrassing stories of learning how to weave or learning how to do anything. Like, what has been the most mortifying situation that you've been in when you've been trying to learn something brand new? I'd love to hear about your stories. I feel much better for sharing that with you now. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you do like this video, please give it a like, and if you would like to see more content like this, please do hit subscribe. We come here almost every Friday to talk about something to do with color and craft. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one. All right, bye for now.